what's interesting about the ages flowing into one another, when Bass, you were talking about all these different birthing of the sort of Gemini concepts, or like
Yeah.
the implementation in theurgy and practice. You're saying that the fertility aspect sort of went into like war preparatory initiative trance activities,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things is that when it comes to the astrological wheel, it comes with like a philosophy that's generally understood in respect to like the Western mystery practice, which is that it's like a path that you go from one direction, but the time itself and the ages are going in the other direction.
Hello and welcome to the Moment podcast. Today we're going to talk about, well, the king, really, could say the king archetype, but really, like we go much deeper into that in really like King Arthur and really like the king, Indo European king mythology, really, like the symbolism behind it, and really like get deeper into that, like what does it mean, and then get straight into the different ages and really like talk about all of these different facets. But maybe like start off first with the Indo European king. So I have some notes written down because it is much to remember. Okay, so first of all, with the Indo European king, one thing that I want to say is what became clear is that the Indo-European king, and the king kind of in general, is the symbol of wholeness, and it's also something connected to the land. And it used to be that the rightful king needed to be whole to be able to actually rule the people. And if he didn't, or like something happened in that sense, though he wasn't whole, and that it's like in the sense of like the body, but also spiritually, and with his connection to the land and the people. If he wasn't whole in that regard, then he used to like lose the right to rule, and he wouldn't be that symbol of wholeness anymore. So then it would be searched for elsewhere. And there's something interesting that I want to point out also, is that with King Arthur and the Holy Grail, that first of all, the Holy Grail in that sense, with like if you bring Carl Jung into it, is connected to the anima, but also to the land, because the answer basically to the myth of the King Arthur and the Holy Grail is you and the land are one, and it really speaks of like a deep connection between you and the surroundings that you really live in. That there's a deep connection there. That one isn't really like that separate in that sense, and yeah, and then also with regarding to like the king, also it's like something like with Osiris, that he was like blinded and he needed like Horus to like gift his eye to be able to see, and it's kind of that idea is in there, that the kind of like maybe like the new generation needs to bring that eye so that the king kind of is whole again, because the king is not only just a symbol of in the person, but kind of the nation in of itself, that it's whole, that it knows things, that it sees certain things, like, oh wait, this isn't working, these aspects are not working anymore, this is out of balance, this is not right. And but there's so much more connected to like the ages too, really. That's why I kind of want to bring the ages up too with it, like what kind of like what we've lost. And in that sense, yeah, I felt like bringing that kind of up as well, because there are certain things like that kind of we lost, and don't know anymore what certain things mean, and then we've kind of lost that connection with certain parts including like in that sense the land and different spiritual aspects. That's kind of like, yeah, kind of so far what I wanted to point out, at least with that so far. Even though I have more notes, but just to start it off.
It's a good start. Yeah, the land aspect is an extremely important component of having a kingdom. You don't have a kingdom without land, animals, rivers and streams and vegetation and trees. You got nothing. You'll be king nothing, the king of nothing, like the Metallica song. But yeah, so yeah, that's an extremely important aspect. What kind of land do you have? What are you working with there? You a king in the desert or are you a king in the forest?
Yeah, I see this element where you bestowed the kingdom, or like you come to realize that the kingdom exists, and then sort of you're given the position by the supernatural forces, or the land itself, whether it be Horus or the land. Um, yeah, it's a very intuitive and holistic idea. You know, if you're how could you be king if you didn't know there was like a kingdom? And then the idea of these natural land or is like almost as if there is a real kingdom instead of it being an abstract idea connected to an abstract idea of power or something, you know?
Yeah, and in that sense, there's like kind of like more to it than just kind of just in that sense power. It's like kind of also a symbol. It's not like it's not truly just like the man or like that's or like that that's the king of the, is the symbol. He the man just represents the is a representative of the symbol of the king, kind of more like what it represents. And there was something from Young to Live By that really stood out to me too, and what they had said. This one channel on YouTube, and then they kind of said that the king is the fulfillment of potential, mirror of personal development, and that it's kind of like a symbol of like it's supposed to be at least a symbol of the full realization of who you are, kind of while you're also connected to the land. So you're fully like adapted to everything, to connected to the land, the instincts, the like the entire community, that there's that like deep connection there, and that's kind of what it symbolizes. That's like when it is whole, and there's I kind of feel like there's a lot of these different elements nowadays missing. It's like the connection to the instincts, the connection to the land, and to community.
Yeah. It's also representative of a stewardship, taking care of something. Um, and I don't think a lot of people have something to take care of, and that's the first thing you got to do to become a king. You have to have something that you're willing to protect, that's important to you, that you're defending, that you're fostering growth. You're learning all the different aspects of your land, and you're proud of it. You have some pride over what you're reigning over. It's not like this dominating, egotistical type of guy. I don't think that's what's at the center of the spirit of the king. I think that it is a steward, somebody that wants to take care of it and help it and defend it, and has a plan, has a vision, knows what to do, knows how to channel the water here and there, and make the crops grow and make the people live and flourish. And have meaningful work, you know, not like a slave driver. Um, yeah, that's what it means to me. That's what I see when I see a kingdom.
Also makes me think of like that a good king is someone who will listen to good advice when it's offered.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, has a group of advisors that he respects, keeps close to him, uh, and listens to good counsel. Like, hey, look, this is going to be bad if we don't do this, this, and this. I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, we should do that. That's a good idea. I don't want all these people to starve. Yeah, let's make that happen. That's a good king because they have the foresight. They see into the future. Like, you want people to actually like you. You know, you want people to actually live. You want to have something rather than nothing. And really, more often than not, like in England and in Europe, if you had a bad king, like there was a very good chance that you would lose your head. Like people would rebel. That was a thing that happened, and even the king's council would rebel. Um, so a lot of kings were very aware of that reality, you know, because you're just one guy, you know, and you can be replaced. There's there's kind of a what do you call it, a dissemination of power with you know, modern government and all that. So it's harder to point the finger at one person. You know, now everybody just says, "Oh, I don't like the government," like the whole thing. Whereas before you'd be like, "I don't really like this king. You know, it's all his fault. Like he needs to get his shit together here. Like what's he doing? Let's get a new king." And that would happen. That would happen very often. Like they would, you know, depose the king. They would throw him out and be like, "I think this guy would be a good king," and then that guy would be the king.
Yeah, I kind of think that that's kind of also where like the story of King Arthur comes in. Because I mean, if you also look at that, I mean, he was like a boy, or like he was younger, and really, and you know there was a bad king, and then he managed to like pull the sword out of the stone, and then slowly like things started changing, and I kind of feel like that's kind of like the idea of like Horus with the eye, like he sees something what the old king does not, because he's become like blind to certain things. And I kind of feel like
Yeah,
it's kind of also like where pull your dick out of the stone comes in, and I kind of like feel like that young like energy kind of is like needed and to really like balance that out, because if that
right.
got lost over time, because people get like you know the leaders get older and everything, then like if that youthful energy got lost, then you end up getting blinded to certain things. I know it happens to everyone. I mean, it will happen to our generation at some point too when we're old fucks. But
Yeah,
I feel like now it's our turn to like point out like, hey, you old folks, listen, we're being blind here, and we're steering into some stuff, and like this is actually what's going on.
yes. And it's also important to know when to put your sword into the Lady of the Lake, when to not swing your sword around, because that's another very important element of King Arthur's story. When he's done with the fighting, he has to throw Excalibur into the lake, because there's always that danger that you can become tyrannical yourself after you just fought that tyranny. So he has to throw Excalibur into the lake, and the lady, and I think that's representative of like a wife, to hold on to your sword until she's like, oh, there's some really bad stuff going on. I'm going to give you permission to be violent. Here's your sword. I'm handing it back to you out of the lake. And he's able to wield it, so he has to keep his dick in the water inside the feminine, right? Until she's like, no, it's time to go out there, to leave me, your wife, and go fight the bad guys. And then when you're done, you can put the sword back in the sheath, so to speak, in the water, in the nice lake. And I
I'm
think
really
it's
glad.
extremely important. Sorry, go ahead, man.
No, sorry. I'm really glad you're only doing audio because I have a really hard time keeping a straight face through that whole. But
But yeah, it's
yeah.
it's very phallic. It's very, what's the girl version of that? Vaginal? I don't know. There are these two elements of the two genders intertwining and interacting in the story of King Arthur. And it's important to know when to swing your sword around and when to put it away, and be a dad, or be a gentler man among your family, among your citizens, not this mean guy. But you got to know when to be that mean guy. When there's somebody outside your kingdom like throwing trebuchets and giant boulders at your walls, then you got to pull that sword out, man. It's time to cut some heads off.
Yeah, there's something interesting with all of this. It's kind of why I wanted to bring up King Arthur, and that a lot of this stuff, what we're talking about now, is all kind of like already like linked to something much more ancient, like that's like Age of Gemini stuff. But really, like, to understand that, you kind of have to understand the Age of Cancer. So that's kind of like what I want to like bring up next. And
Can we pause before we go into Cancer? Real quick.
Yeah, we can pause.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention that I think that it's been, obviously it's been brought up when you talk about Horus and you talk about the king as a whole being, or having to adapt to everything. Um when I've looked into these myths, I've seen that it's always been associated with the idea of the king as a solar deity. And this is actually a question I have, is I don't know, is this always the case? Is the king always a solar deity? As far as when it comes to this sort of lineage of like mythic lore, um, because all the qualities seem to point to that. It's like is like sort of the mystery of like, where does the attainment of the solar energy come from, or the solar embodiment? It comes from becoming one with the land. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but is it always like solar in the sense of like as a sun, And
Yeah,
that's actually
I
something that I'm not sure of, or I don't know
it,
exactly.
as far as I've read, the sun is always masculine and the moon is always feminine, because the moon, has everything to do with the oceans, the tides, and without the earth, which is, I guess, could be the child of the sun and the moon, without it being between that masculine and feminine, there would be no life at all whatsoever. There would be nothing. So you need that masculine sun that's a little further away. It's a little more distant. It might be, a little harder to reach out to dad. But your mom, the moon, is very close by, watching over you, and controlling the tides and doing all of this other very important stuff, for life itself to exist. And that's how the earth is. That's what's going on. I think it's really deep. There's a lot of very interesting symbolism within reality itself, within the actual model of the solar system that we inhabit. Kind of blows my mind when I say it out loud. But yeah, definitely there's that masculine and feminine aspect with those two celestial bodies. And I guess Jupiter's like and Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
Those are our aunts and uncles. I don't know. It's just there's some other planets out there too, doing very important things, protecting us from giant asteroids and meteors from hitting the Earth. That's what those gas giants do. That could have been suns, could have been kings themselves, but they're like lords and squires, and they're serving an extremely important role as well, protecting the Earth. Anyway, that's all I'll say on that.
Yeah, I just saw here that I have here with my notes something still written about the king, and I said here, without the connection to the land community and being grounded in the world reality, one becomes disembodied, acting within fantasy, which easily becomes destructive. And I kind of feel like that's kind of also the connection to the feminine kind of balances that out. Because otherwise it becomes very, I guess, like detached, like more like, I guess, Peter Pan, where if he has to become like a man, a husband, it's more, it needs to be more grounded, and it needs to be in the water and in the lake within the feminine, so that grounds it and keeps it like more not going off and becoming a tyrant itself, kind of thing. It's like the balancing out between those two poles, like how you now also said, between the masculine and the feminine, that it needs to balance each other out.
Yeah. Did you ever see the Robin Williams movie of Peter Pan? I think they really leaned into the Jungian aspect of that story, because it showed him becoming a doctor and actually living within reality. But then he came into the opposite problem of losing his fantasy, losing his imagination, and he had to rediscover that. I thought that was really cool, because you're right. If you live too much in the fantasy world, that's destructive. But also, if you live too much in reality without that fantasy, that's also destructive. It's like this constant balancing act on this seesaw of life, that you've got to be a little imaginative, and you also got to be a little bit realistic in order to manifest your future and have a good kingdom. Because if you don't sit around fantasizing about the future and how fantastic it could be, then you might not try to make things better.
Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, the balance really is just needed. Have here also like something about, the feminine more, and that's something that actually came up because Lynn had said something about matter being feminine, and I started looking into that, and then I came like with the Age of Cancer stuff, like a lot of interesting stuff up, and there actually are like links in that, with the word actually being linked to like the Earth goddess. So like Magna, Mater, Cybele, Gaia, Demeter, Mater, Kubelea, which means Mother of the Mountain. And there's a lot of interesting stuff with regarding to that, and it kind of forms the basis of like a lot of the stuff in Age of Cancer for Age of Gemini and everything that comes really after. And that's one interesting point, is that these like feminine goddesses are also tutelary goddesses. Really, what it means is that they are guardians of mountains and different areas, such as rivers, forests, and so on. And with like Cybele, but also Magna Mater and these different goddesses. There's also a very interesting link there, because a lot of them you can link back to Catalhuyuk, for instance. Cybele, for instance, can be linked back to that. Like they have traced it back to there, and that's like 7,000 BC around, like when that is, which is Age of Cancer in that sense. And they had written down something very interesting what they had found out about it in the old script that they had used there, and different findings that they have made, and that is that she was linked to be a mediator between boundaries of the known and unknown, civilized and wild, the worlds of the living and dead. You know, and she originated there, and I also know that in the area there were, it was like the area of the shamans, and in particular female shamans, because the shamans were originally female. And yeah, there's other stuff linked to that too, like where that what came from there and went elsewhere to, for instance, Greece, for instance, too. But like that's one thing I wanted to like already bring up of this, and it like forms the basis kind of a lot of other stuff that we have kind of forgotten.
Most of the information that I know about the Magna Mater cult comes from way after, like the inception into the Greek culture, and then the male cult where they like castrated themselves and some of those things. But I know that it goes back like way before, and then in art class they have all these like sculptures of different forms of women, um, celebrating their fertility. So I don't know anything about the earlier cult forms, and is there a lot of information about the kinds of like practices, or because for example with like the king, the myth of the king, the myth of like of King Arthur and Merlin, like it gets associated with certain things and practices. We know what those practices might have been. We have ideas about them, like having to do with Stonehenge. But what about Magna Mater? Do we know about do we have ideas about those kinds of rites? You know?
From what I know about Catalhuyuk and the area there, from what I've read, is that there used to be there. The goddesses were associated with mountains, and there was like from what I also know from like shamanism now, that is still like in like Asia still present, like that kind of worship, that they would be giving offerings to the mountains, from like food offerings and offerings like that.
Okay.
Also, grain and seeds are often offered. In Malta also, they had like a linked site there, and they were offering seeds at the temple there as an offering back to the goddess, because they were a gift from the goddess. And for the rest of the shamans, they also had like a skull cult of like ancestors that had died, and their skulls were placed on stones, and there was like an ancestor cult that's also very like linked to like shamanism, that the ancestors were revered as like, well, kind of still living, and their heads were then placed on the stone, and the stone itself was a symbol also for the goddesses, because they were born from the stone that came from the mountain. That's their origin of birth, and that's kind of in of itself a symbol of the self, like how Carl Jung would say.
That's very interesting. With the Cancer symbolism, I've always heard it having to do with the melting of the ice, or like coming from like a place of hardship and then somehow like making it through. And so if like all your ancestors or the ones that you worship are like in stone, and then you have to like create life, or they emerge, it, it kind of fits the aesthetic, if you know what I mean. um
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's something else, also else interesting, which I don't think a lot of people know, because I've been for quite some time been looking into like Dionysus and the mysteries, the Eleusinian and Bacchic mysteries connected to him, and like very like going back to like the source of it all. And one interesting thing is that those two cults originated from the feminine Gaia cult from Cybele. They were born kind of like they were born from that, because Dionysus was in the myth also initiated into that, and it's kind of like a continuation later on, because we're here talking like going like Age of Gemini, Taurus to Aries, basically. That kind of continued in that form, at least in Greece. And there's even shamanistic elements into with like these mysteries with regarding to like going into trance states with a drum and spirit possession and different states like that. And really like what stood out to me also is that it was really about like a primordial state that they wanted to return to. That's kind of like from some of the old stuff that I could figure out from it, kind of what stood out. That's kind of like what it is about, and it's kind of in the Jungian sense, kind of a balancing out of the persona with like the instincts and the primordial hunter-gatherer us that we kind of are. In that sense, to balance that out, so you don't become all like lopsided and in society and stuff, and kind of reconnect to our wild side in that sense.
So, in terms of the symbolism, would you still put all of this stuff kind of within the realm of Cancer? Simply the idea of like reaching the unattainable primordial wild, sort of like facing the hardship and yet finding yourself in tune with it.
Yes, I would like connect those two things together. Like also Dionysus, it comes out of the Age of Cancer. That's the source of it all, and like Dionysus became like a symbol of the basically the unconscious. It's kind of what he is a symbol of. A lot of people think it's like a drunk or something, and it's about partying, but it's not. It's a combination of basically the hardship, but on the one hand, and then the feasts and the nurturing and the connection to like the abundance of nature, and it's those two things that it brings together. So that's why I would really say like that's the source of it all. And like there's other rites that's really like more Age of Gemini. That's like that they also did all the way back then, but that's like something else. But like with this, that's really the source of it. And I think that's one of the like kind of the pillars of knowledge that we kind of lost. This idea of like this connection between abundance and hardship, and this balancing out of that and celebrating it in the community. Because the Age of Cancer is connected to that as well. It's very communal. It's very going through this together kind of thing. These rituals were communal rituals, and not really as much about like just the individual. And it was about the connection with nature, the ecosystem, like how we're a part of all of that, like how we're connected to that, and the spirits of nature and the fertility spirits too, and like and it brings us kind of back to that, which is kind of also an important thing now, and like the modern world, that we kind of get that connection back to nature and to our instincts and our wild like self, in our kind of our Cancerian self, in that sense, where we can
Mhm.
find that balance.
Kind of makes me think of this idea of like realizing that you're a tree, like realizing that you have like all of these veins that are carrying water that have like a rhythm. You have like all of these passageways within your body, and then if you can like slow perception, you could essentially realize that you're like immovable, and that would get you through the hardships of the natural world, I would imagine. And that could be something that people are tapping into when it comes to trance states. um, One of the things that I experience, or I think a lot of people do, is the idea that like exhaustion comes upon you. But scientifically, we're learning so much about how the body works and what how insulin is part of that exhaustion process, where it's like it carries the essence of sort of the junkie within you. And if you can learn to withstand that, then you find out that the whole idea of you feeling tired was sort of like a mental concept that you were surrendering to, and that you're a lot more stable. Like, for example, chemotherapy patients are um, much less affected by the side effects of chemotherapy after like 2 or 3 days of not eating, which doesn't make sense because you think like, well, they're they're hanging on for dear life. Don't you want to keep them fed? Well, the thing is that the cells themselves become more stable after fasting, after entraining the insulin to become more sensitive and to become more functional. And so I know I'm getting into the that stuff, but I to me it kind of makes sense as like this big what were they experiencing? What were they entraining themselves? What was becoming strong? They were becoming like stone in a sense. They were becoming strong enough to be able to sense the more subtle things, and to me it kind of like ties it together for me.
I do know that, like, from what I also read, is that before the trance states that they would be doing, and they would also be dancing and singing and chanting, they would first fast, and they would do the dancing, the chanting, they would go into the trance state, and then would come the feast and everything else that came with it, and the or what they would call the orgies, but basically that's the fertility rites, kind of like the old fertility rites that came out of that age of Cancer too. And it's like yeah, but there's like this balancing out of kind of these two things. And I think that yeah, they kind of were like symbolically like symbolizing that. And then there was the abundance there, and a lot of older other rituals that came from that time also, with one goddess, Feronia, for instance, that I looked into quite a while ago. It was similarly also with, it's different, but it's also offerings of like fruit seeds and different seeds to and fruit in general of the harvest to the goddess again. And it's kind of like a thank you for all of the abundance that nature provides.
Yeah, and even if like that was kind of like a symbolic gesture, it really I guess keeps people aware of being in gratitude for things, to have those rituals, which we have mostly lost in the modern day.
Yeah, so I'm hearing that there is a lot of unifying factors because it takes in the idea of gratitude. and it sort of allows people to experience it in reference to each other as a community. Um, a lot of times I get angry when people were say like to each their own. Well, I feel like that sentiment in the vocabulary is like much should be much bigger, should be much more encapsulating. I think that's true. It's not really like available. That community sort of it's like how it's kind of difficult to even talk about it, you know.
Yeah, it really is. And it really is. It's difficult to talk about it, but like it is something like that one really can notice because a while back I looked into like what is trending on YouTube nowadays, and then one video that was popping, or like some videos that were popping up, was basically about people feeling lonely, basically, or being alone and stuff like that. So I kind of feel like there's really something there that people are really yearning for. I feel that's kind of like the Cancerian wisdom that's there, that can bring that up, and also kind of a healing too. Because I mean, when you're connecting to in those trance states, and I'm speaking here from experience, that it really brings you in a kind of like an alignment state too. That you align to the instincts, you align to yourself, to your body, and it takes you out of your head. It takes you out of all of the moral, social rule crap that's going on in society. Because in the Dionysian mysteries, those things didn't matter. It was like a liberation, an escape for the soul to really to be free, to be itself, and like these things don't matter here now, and we can just fully like just be and just be in joy. Because that's also one thing that he was associated with, because his reign was the dominion of joy and happiness of Dionysus, and that's kind of like something that I guess people don't get, that that's kind of like what he represented, and that his rituals were that to bring you out of that. Because you can have enough, or like you can have too much of like of morals and all kinds of things like that. Not that you can only live in like, I guess, like no rules at all kind of thing, because Capricorn is kind of needed to like in that sense too, like the structure. It's the opposite of Cancer, but there's a lot of like good wisdom in there, the Cancerian wisdom, that I feel like we can really learn from.
Well, I'd like to say something about the people that feel lonely out there. I don't think that this has really ever happened before in our history. I think something new is happening. In that, you know, you had the printing press several hundred years ago. Everybody started learning how to read. Then you had all kinds of people starting to write different books, different ideas, different stories, different adventures. Then you had people kind of splitting off with their interests. We used to kind of have a homogenized interest, or culture even, or things to talk about. And we've been splitting and splitting and splitting. Then you had radio, then you had television, now you have the internet and video games. Goes on and on and on. I think that's the source of our loneliness. Each of us have gone off in some other path of consciousness, and it's a scattering. It's a great scattering of psychic energy, and these people go way down these other paths, and there's just not as many people down at the ends of them. And so now it's time to build our little kingdoms down at the ends of these paths and branch out yet again. Have like these nodes, these castles, these strongholds of where other conscious beings can go out and make their pilgrimage in those directions. I don't think that there's any real way to solve, let's just say, the population issue surrounding around certain interests. Like, say you're into World of Warcraft, say you're into Star Trek, say you're into Lord of the Rings or whatever, you know, or Harry Potter, or it just goes on and on. Not everybody's going to be there, but what do you do to get as many people that are like you in that area? And I think that's what we're talking about here with the kingdoms, building your own kingdom to try to find some solace in this loneliness from our journeys far out into these interesting ideas, these new vistas of reality that we find ourselves alone in. I mean, we're not alone now, of course. You know, all of us are talking here. You guys got your own Discord servers and YouTube channels and things like that, and that's exactly what we're doing. Metaphorically, these are our kingdoms, and this is our alliance. This is literally the round table room that we're in. We're really doing these things, and kind of lighting some torches on the path that we just walked down for other people to congregate in our kingdoms at our round tables. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that. I just wanted to point that out. Just, yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah. I don't know if any of you have still something to say about the kind of the age of Cancer still, or otherwise I'll highlight a bit about Age of Gemini, kind of like what that's kind of about, like how that comes from Age of Cancer and like kind of what that is.
Sure, I have a closing thought. I guess to me, I feel like what I realize is how much the fertility rites are important to that symbolism. And that's something that I didn't really know was as deeply associated. And I think that um the the unconscious association that like sex can happen is of one of the most powerfully potent ideas that can be used, suppressed. But I think that in general, just the disempowerment that comes with feeling like it just not even going to be touched at all. I think that has a lot to do with loneliness, and then you have the extreme of like addiction that I think a lot of people are dealing with, where it's like you can come back from loneliness, but when you come back and then you're just there with everybody else, but you're so distant because this deep part of you is not even being interacted with. I think that's one of the things that that symbolic teaching could help remedy. It's like maybe we don't necessarily need to have orgies, maybe, but uh but maybe something else. Maybe in general, the trance teachings could lead to a general unfoldment towards um well, sometimes I feel like with the right kind of work, you can go into a grocery store and you're feeling like you're sharing the same atmosphere, the same fluid as everybody else. Like there's a part of you
Well,
that's walking in tune with strangers. And I think that
Yeah.
is part of that unlocking into that direction that could
well,
happen.
I think we do have a replacement for orgies, and they're festivals or parties, house parties. And I guess at Burning Man they still are literally having orgies. They're orgy tents, but for the most part, when you go to a festival, you meet someone nice, and then you kind of split off and go over to your own tent, I guess, and do your exchange your fluids, let's just say. And I think that's more of an acceptable cultural thing instead of everybody doing it together. But the important parts, the most critical parts, which is getting in front of the stage and dancing with everybody and speaking with everybody and, taking interesting psychedelics and exploring that together, but leaving the sex part out, I think is the replacement for that. That is what people do. People do still actively seek those things out every summer, every year. Because me and some buddies of mine went to one and they had a great time. They one of them found a girlfriend. Another one, he had a good time. I don't think he found a girlfriend, but he found a good time. and I danced and I had a great time. And I got what I needed out of that. They got what they needed. And there was a feeling of fulfillment, and not necessarily a need to continuously do that every single week, but yeah, maybe next year.
Yeah, and I don't know. In that sense, maybe like with like the whole orgies and all of that stuff and the sex thing. Maybe it's not just in that sense, just that, but maybe in like a deeper sense, it might be when we're also talking about loneliness and now too, it's maybe intimacy, but like really like that that there's like more of an intimate relationship really like with other people, so that you actually can express these deeper parts of oneself.
Yeah. I think that's what it is. Yeah, the intimacy with people, and that doesn't necessarily mean sex. That can just mean dancing or doing some mushrooms together or singing a song around a campfire or having a deep conversation with each other about philosophy or something like that. Yeah, that's that is extremely important. And I almost think that an orgy is more shallow. It's shallow. It's not very intimate. It's not as deep as maybe dancing or doing some psychedelics and talking, having a deep conversation with people about something. That's like tapping into your soul. Um, an orgy isn't doing that. That's just, I don't know, more animalistic instead of human, let's say. And those cultures that indulged in those things, they didn't last very long. They died. They're gone. And that's just
I
shared toilet sponges. That's a little too intimate for me too, or whatever you want to call that. Gross. Sorry, Lynn. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I was gonna mention about dancing, like how that connects us to our instincts and our body. When in modern day we are quite a lot in our heads, and we might even forget to feel what we are feeling in our bodies. But dancing gets us back to that, and I think that dancing together is really a good way to go about that. And then it's also like the social aspect of it, that you're meeting your friends or new people, or yeah, in that sense too, at festivals or dances, or yeah, I think that's a good way to
Yeah.
bring the age of cancer to with us to now in modern times and beyond.
Totally agree. Yeah.
You got to be careful though. I think I threw my neck out dancing the other night. I went to the bar, and they were playing there's a rock band playing, and man, I danced too hard. I can't move my neck around very well. So don't throw your neck out. But yeah, it was great because that's exactly what was going on at my local bar. Is everybody was socializing. It started out as just one or two people getting up there, and everybody's like, "Oh, look at them dancing," and I was immediately like, "Let's go up there and dance." And then some people were like, "I don't know," and then we were talking to them outside, and they're like, "You need to get up there and dance." And then everybody's like, "Oh, okay." And then people started pulling people out of the tables, and holding their hand and dragging them out to the dance floor. And then before you know it, everywhere that was space to dance, people were dancing, and it was amazing, and it was great fun. And all the embarrassing feelings or whatever insecurities people felt went away, and we were all just up there having a great time. And not only that, the band got a lot of energy and encouragement out of that, and they kept playing longer than I think they planned on. And so the party just kept going until I think the band got so exhausted they're like, "We're done. We got to go. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. We got to go to sleep. We're tired."
Yeah, that sounds so great.
Yeah.
But remember to be also gentle with your neck.
Yeah, don't throw your neck out like I did. Yeah, I was going too hard. I was headbanging too much, swaying myself around in wild gyrations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't throw your neck, your back, your hips,
Yeah.
or your dick.
Yeah, no. Don't throw that shit out. Be careful with yourself so you can dance tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, I think I kind of now like also want to say something about the age of Gemini, really. And one thing already kind of what I can bring up is that the age of Gemini stuff I kind of grew out of the age of Cancer, because there were like these kind of out of the like shamanism, animism from the age of Cancer. There were certain rituals that kind of were like more like hunting magic that kind of like transformed and became war magic. And the old rituals, kind of like the purpose of it is still the same, but it kind of like transformed in like the form of it, really. But yeah, let's get my notes here. What I had written down here: Age of Gemini. Yeah, so Koryos, wolf bear shamanism. Well, when it comes to that, the Koryos kind of is like a young male warband of shape-shifting boar or wolf warriors, or bear warriors too, in certain cultures. Depends on the culture. But they had these rites. So if before puberty, they would go away from their parents. They would be like trained before. They would go out into the world outside of the tribe, and they would be initiated into this, like let's say wolf shamanism, to just name an example. And they would be outside of society, and the kind of the purpose was for that was kind of like for them to like become wolves and to connect to these different animals and become these animals. And then they would go out and they would go hunting, and they would have to fend for themselves. And it was like an important ritual for them to go through, so that they would break free from their parents and from society, and kind of like in like psychological terms, it would be like the parental complexes, how they would say it, but really like from the parents. And they would break free, could fully like rebel, and then they after a certain amount of years they would come back, and they then would become the wild hunt, and in that really like only then they would become a man once they went through that, because then they would be the wild hunt led by Odin, a figure that like would play Odin, and they would go as a procession through the area of the tribe, basically the land that they would live on, and they would become their ancestors. And kind of what that's connected to is that they would lose their identity symbolically through becoming their ancestors, and also kind of being connected to history in that sense, but also their something beyond themselves, kind of, and then they would be rescued from that symbolically. Then they would become their own man, and then symbolically for the tribe, it was like, look, this boy is no longer. He is now his ancestor, and now he is rescued from this, and he becomes his own man. And the thing is that one interesting thing is that Apollo is linked to that too, because he's linked to wolves, and he's can be traced back to this like Koryos wolf shamanism. Odin too is connected to wolves and bears and this wolf shamanism, and like kind of this rite of passage to becoming a man. And similarly also Mars is connected to it as well, and Quirinus. They're like Quirinus is like a obscure god that throws spears over like a temple. Their priests do that, and it's kind of connected to like hunting and the hunt. Where Mars also is connected to the wolves, and like Romulus and Remus is, and they're like the divine twins too, because there's like a connection with that too. Because the divine twins from the age of Gemini, they are both connected to this kind of like wolf and bear shamanism, because Apollo's twin sister Artemis, she's connected to bears, and the girls would go through this she-bear ritual for Artemis, and they would become like freed from their parents. These girls, they would go into the sanctuary led by these priestesses, and they would like have like a mask that was shaped like a bear, and they would become like a wild bear, and they would become basically they could become wild and rebel and fully break free from that. And similarly, like the boys too, they with their wolf shamanism, they would become free, and they would connect to instincts, and they would try to like, I guess, really get that part of themselves like out there, and that they can connect to it, so that they don't get like just taken over by it. It's not in their shadow in that sense. So they integrated that, so they are in tune with their wildness. Where like later on, like the Dionysian rites is kind of like a reconnecting to the wildness if it's needed, kind of thing. That's kind of what that became. But like there's this like connection to that. But interestingly enough, is like, for instance, with like Artemis too, and here's so written that Artemis is also connected to bears, but also to the other wild animals, and particularly with like protecting nature and the trees, the forest, the wild animals, and that you really like hunt what you need, kind of thing. That you don't hunt more, you don't hunt for pleasure, you hunt for what you need. And similarly, like that comes out of like really like the Age of Cancer shamanism and like hunting shamanism, but also like the Native Americans still had that you hunt for what you need. Like the Inuits have that too. Inuits, like, yeah, they have that too. The different cultures that still do that, they have that kind of knowledge. Like you hunt what you need, you respect nature, you protect nature. You don't just destroy certain things. You have to like make sure that they're protected. Like with the Romans too, the wolf, for instance, but also other wild animals that were highly revered. They were symbols of these gods, and symbols kind of throwing back to the wolf shamanism, and kind of this symbol of wildness, and like the pack kind of too. This connection of like being like like the mother bear, kind of like this like Cancerian mother archetype is in that, like the protective mom kind of archetype, and then the and kind of the wolf also as the wolf pack. This like kinship bond is in that too. And really, it's for these individuals, these young individuals, to like break free from their parents and discover this for themselves, that hey, this is something I have in myself. So then later on, after I think it was like 6 to 7 years that they went through these rituals, they would be ready to go through the final ritual, like the Wild Hunt ritual, or another ritual for the girls that they went through, that then it would be like, now you're an adult, and now you can become your own like mother and father figure for your kids, and then they can go through these rituals and kind of like
This is really heavy what you're saying. This is bringing to mind like just like what typical teenagers used to do. Like let's go back in time through American culture anyway. You had the greasers with the greased hair and the leather jackets, and then you had the hippies kind of striking out and rebelling, and then you had the metalhead kids with like the spiked bracelets and collars and stuff, and then you had the goth kids that kind of broke away and did their own thing and had their own commentary on society and everything, and rebelled against their parents. But when you get into the 21st century, that went away. Like that rebellious streak, that 6 or 7 years of teenage rebellion, away from the parents, there's more of a disassociation instead of a rebellion now. There's more of a just no participating in society. At least with the goth kids, they were rebellious and had some smart shit to say. Like they were kind of smart asses and would be like, yeah, well, smoking their cigarette, just talking shit about the government or the world or whatever. Now you get like this strange mainstream sanctioned rebellion. Like rebellion is cool now, and there's like not any sort of genuine spirit in it any longer. And I don't think the kids are able to develop into adults now. Like they're not able to make their own kingdoms because of it.
Yeah, and kind of the whole lesson of that with the Age of Gemini kind of also is that these kids were encouraged to basically go through these rituals and then kind of discover this stuff for themselves. That's kind of the whole purpose of it. They
right.
It's something very, very long time ago. I read something that really like stood or like really like was something powerful that I read about, like how they used to kind of view this kind of thing. How like the kids basically were not from the parents, but they were a gift from the gods, and and they actually built this space for them where they could break free, where they could rebel, and it wouldn't like necessarily harm the society that much, but they could rebel and then bring back this like this life force, this like the eye that is missing, kind of like, you know, that sees these different things, because that's what we're missing with that kind of. That's like bringing it back to the king. It's like the king has become blind, and like the kids are being led by a fake rebellion, but they actually have to do a real rebellion. And these things are actually actually good. We have to do that. Kids need to play. Kids need to rebel. They need to do these things, not made into like something that parents want them to be or whatever. No, it's about connecting to their instincts, their potential, and let that like shine through, because otherwise what you get is like the tyrannical father and mother kind of. and then
Yeah.
that's kind of what you get is like the people talking about this Machina devouring robot woman and patriarchy, and it's everywhere, and it's like and that's what they're kind of needing to go through. They need to break free from this crap so that then they can discover who they are, what their potential is, and bring that like light and fire back that kind of is missing, so that we can renew things.
It's a rebellion against the natural cycle itself, and I think that's why they're not becoming adults. Like they're rebelling against their own cycle, their own DNA. There's like a self-hatred for being a human, instead of like, well, here are our limitations. Let's see what we can do within these lines. And now there's like a concerted effort to erase those lines, and this like transcendence movement, quote unquote, of moving beyond what's even possible. And because it's not possible, there's a prolonged frustration and a prolonged rebellion instead of a kingdom, instead of a realistic look with that eye to see what is possible and navigating a path to make that reality. They're stuck in the fantasy of transcendence, of the impossible. Yeah. I think you've really hit something there. I really think you're really onto something with that, because that's what I'm seeing too. There's just this arrested development, and people are stuck.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that's interesting too, because kind of like why I looked into this kind of in the first place is because I started having dreams about this kind of stuff, and like I was really driven by, well, I could say like the unconscious, to look into this stuff, and it was something I needed to like look at, because I was obsessed about the divine twins. I was obsessed about, also interesting thing about the divine twins, what they represent. One represents consciousness, the other represents unconsciousness, and it's about finding that balance between the two, so that then you can actually properly work together. Because if there's this imbalance between them, then there is ego inflation, and you start to like create all kinds of problems, and you destroy things that you shouldn't destroy. You throw the baby out with the bathwater, basically. So there needs to be like this this balance, kind of, because otherwise either it becomes too rigid, or you throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it's kind of that balance that's needed. But I was like going through all of this, and then eventually I figured this stuff out now, and then I went and did it. I went out into the woods. I was howling like a wolf, and I was like drumming with my shaman drum. And might sound crazy to some, but the weird thing is that it actually worked. It actually, I managed to grow up, so to speak. I did. I managed to actually do it. I actually managed to like get through this block. And I actually started to stop seeing certain things. And also, one weird thing is that Jordan Peterson stopped appealing to me, because it used to really like be also like one of the like guys obsessed with that. But it's kind of that spell has worn off because of that. I don't know exactly like why that is.
You figured it out. You went past his lesson. You know, I think he was a great lesson for a lot of people, but people 5 years on still obsessing over what he's saying, because he's just saying the same stuff. Now he's being a lot more commanding. He's being a lot more I guess tyrannical with his words, like how he's telling Christians how they should conduct themselves, and how he's telling Muslims how they should conduct themselves. And then I'm kind of be like, who the hell are you to tell people this? Like, why don't you stay in your own lane, bro? Like, why don't you just talk about psychology? And and interpret the Bible, like that's interesting. But all this other stuff where you're telling people what to do, I'm not so sure the whole world's your kingdom, bro. But
Yeah.
a lot of people are still like wanting him to do that, and so now he's doing it because he's getting paid a lot of money to say these things. So yeah, I think it's very healthy to not listen to him as intently anymore, because we're not his children, and I don't really like his tone. Like where he's like, oh, I'm your dad now, and this is what you kids need to do. But there's so many people that refuse to grow up. So there's always going to be somebody there to tell you exactly what to do if you insist on being lost forever.
Yeah, and something like hit me like a while ago, and it's probably something very controversial to say in these times, but I kind of a part of me is like, because he's been dealing with something, and it's something that hit me, and it's like I don't know it's like an intuition. It's like that Jordan Peterson is and Peter Pan. It's like I feel like there's a link there. Like he is the king of the Lost Boys.
Oh yeah,
and I kind of feel
for
like
sure.
for that sense, like once you have to, like, for the people obsessed with him, it's like you need to like get through this phase and like move past it, basically.
Yeah.
So you don't longer need to listen to Jordan Peterson. You're your own adult now. And the thing is, like, there's also something interesting about the Divine Twins too, and it's like if they fail to do it, to actually grow up and go it, or like try to stay in this wolf shamanism phase. Jung had written something about that together with like one of his like colleagues, or like one of the Joseph L. Henderson, it's called. Yes, he wrote something interesting about it, like how in the myth, if they stay in that phase, what happens is ego inflation. If they don't go through the wild hunt phase of the ancestors, which is that they're thrown into the collective unconscious and they symbolically die and then are reborn. If they don't go through that, then what happens is ego inflation, because they don't have this proper alignment with the unconscious. That they get that they actually have humility and understand, like, I am absolutely nothing in the scope of the self, and like let alone the collective unconscious. So I better like I'm humble and realize, like, not everything is my kingdom, and like not everyone is my child, and I'm and there's certain like limits to that. And I kind of feel like
fucks you up real bad.
Yeah, and like the whole like mana personality thing, like Koryos talked about, but also Steve from Young to Live By, because that's kind of like what Koryos had pointed out one time to me, was that like Jordan Peterson apparently is like one of those mana personalities, and kind of like and that links kind of to like the whole Divine Twins and the heroes myth, basically, that moves on beyond its point where it's supposed to go.
Well, it's definitely a Messiah complex,
Yeah.
Have you ever heard Russell Brand talk about this type of thing? Russell
No.
Brand went pretty deep into the whole Messiah complex. He had a comedy special called that. And it was, kind of half comedy and half philosophy. And if you're a good comedian, that's what it turns out to be, comedy. So you can get the truth in there and people can laugh about it and release their traumas about things. But I think, Russell Brand was fortunate to break away from the ego inflation by calling it out. He's like, who do I think I am? Jesus, look at my hair, look at my beard, and I'm trying to help people. Who do I think I am? Like he's kind of making fun of himself to dispel that ego inflation a little bit. But he's like, yet here I still am trying to help people in the most humble way that I can. And, for a long time, I couldn't take Russell Brand seriously. But I think the guy is actually doing a good job of being a leader, of helping people, because he's not doing what Jordan Peterson is doing now, being this sort of tyrannical father type. Russell Brand is really trying to be sort of like, so what the hell's going on? Let's talk about it. Let's hear from this guy. Let's hear from that guy. Let's not make any strong statements about something. And he'll like mull something over for a few months, and he'll be like, I think that this might be going on. I don't know what you guys think. Tell me what you think in the comments. Like, it's just a whole different energy. And I think that comes from popping that ego, that bubble, when it starts to get bigger and bigger by making fun of yourself or by pointing these things out. Like, who do I think I am? What do I think that I'm trying to do? What is going on anyway? And I think that's an important thing to do with yourself. You can't take yourself too seriously. And that's all I see Jordan Peterson doing. Like, he takes himself dead serious. Like, he looks like, that dude from what's that? V for Vendetta, when he pops up on the screen and he's just like giving this really serious speech, and he's just like his words and his voice are just very firm and stern.
It's premature. He's giving himself as a final point to society, where maybe there's a place for that kind of seriousness, but this ain't it. So he's like, he's decided that he's found it. He's found the point of finality that is good enough for the rest of us. And I think that it's kind of an issue of being a big fish in a small pond, where it's like just like between us, we have these topics that we want to talk about, and we need a forum. But what if we get into the point where our ideas need to evolve, we need to evolve, but all we have is each other? It's like, at some point you need to have some kind of point of self-initiation so that you're able to unfold and take it to the next level, or else you're going to start thinking that your ideas are good enough for everybody else, and never realizing that maybe somebody just like was better, and there's plenty of people who have ideas that are better than Jordan Peterson. I mean, this Gemini stuff has so many things that you can say. I think that I like to think about what is it in of itself as like a symbolic essence, and I hear a lot of concepts about that seem to be related to the concept of like becoming something more than yourself, and also the balance point, knowing whether or not are you actually going somewhere, or are you sort of just staring in the mirror, liking where you are. And then that's where the Jordan Peterson bit kind of like comes into play. Is he's like is unfortunate representation of being satisfied, not knowing that you're satisfied,
Yeah.
and it's very deeply psychological in that way. Um, for me, so like a closing thought in this little rant is that I think that what's interesting about the ages flowing into one another, when Bass, you were talking about all these different birthing of the sort of Gemini concepts, or like the implementation in theurgy and practice. You're saying that the fertility aspect sort of went into like war preparatory initiative trance activities, right? And so one of the things is that when it comes to the astrological wheel, it comes with like a philosophy that's generally understood in respect to like the Western mystery practice, which is that it's like a path that you go from one direction, but the time itself and the ages are going in the other direction. So I kind of see it as like that one age goes to another era's predisposition, and they take the lay person who's swept up within these changes, is taken into these changes in a way that actually erodes the nature of the essences of the symbolisms themselves. So maybe it's actually supposed to be that this Gemini essence of becoming is supposed to go into fertility and then into Leo, into the successive mysteries. But they're actually, time is what time is doing to us, is it's unwinding them. It's like tearing them apart and then like rendering them into their base materials, maybe as like a lesson, so that you're supposed to understand the underlying and not get torn apart. You're supposed to go through it and sort of like like a rock facing like an ocean, getting worn away, like how, use it to refine yourself rather than be ground to dust. Just some of the things that like I was thinking about, is like so much stuff relating to this,
Yeah.
that I kind of had some of these thoughts beforehand, but this conversation really helped them like rise to the surface.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, yeah, for me too.
Just one
That's
last.
the cool thing about
Yeah.
talking. Like we're able to think so much more deeply through conversation than just sitting around ourselves or writing it down. Uh, Conversation is extremely important, and I'm glad that we can do that with each other.
Yeah, there's one thing like kind of still what I wanted to point out. It's also a bit like about like how with the divine twins also, that like one is consciousness, one is unconsciousness, one is Apollo, the other is Dionysus, and they need to work together basically. And also one thing I wanted to point out is that it's like also with the left and the right brain, it's like what combines these two things, what combines the what is actually what the brings the both of these aspects together. What's it's a coming into after the age of Gemini. You're coming into community. That's what you have to reintegrate into. What do you have to reintegrate into the age of kind of Cancer, into that kind of community space. That's what you have to come back into. So you go from age of age of Gemini kind of into the age of Cancer, and there's and kind of also one thing that had been said about logos, eros, and thumos, or like the left and the right brain and the anima, and it's like that what the anima, it's what brings it together, kind of the two twins. So the age of Cancer brings it together, the communal aspect that aligns it, and you can see that in the myth of the Wild Hunt and like these other myths and rituals kind of connected to it. That's what kind of what brings it back together into like a well functioning whole, so that you understand your place as a human being in relationship to others, the community, and the environment. That you know, like, this is the scope of all of this, and who the hell do I think that that I am? I am not the lord of everyone. But it's also like that I'm not, and that I'm nothing. It's like, because everything is connected with each other, and it's all an integral part of everything. You're part of the ecosystem. Like, everything plays its role, and it's kind of this understanding of that, but also like kind of the idea, the very ancient idea of that as a child of you're not a child of your parents, you're a child of the gods, and kind of in that sense the ecosystem itself, kind of, that you're a child of something much bigger than what you think.
Yeah. It's like that, and that's the most difficult thing to do when you're in that peak of that Gemini sort of polarity, is to take all of that self-importance, all of that role playing, you know, all these rich people who are making so much money and they're like, where are we going to invest? And then to imagine just like, well, now go live amongst, others, and like learn what the people need, be kings. It's like the most difficult thing. Everybody's like, well, then you're just going to lose it all. So we put it into productivity. So we put it into, the Taurus. We just surrender to the flow, um like I mean like industrial, when I think of like the industrial age, the industrial revolution and machinery, it's like we have this influence of the agriculturization of our, being turned into more and more successive explosions of innovations to make something natural easier. And that's where the money always goes, instead of learning to give it to communities to be a part of them.
Because
Well,
there's like a point where making things easier on ourselves becomes like, then we have kind of too much time on our hands, and then we just disassociate from reality, and it just doesn't seem very healthy in the long run.
yeah, when I think of nowadays, or the rune nowadays, I associate that with Gemini, and it's supposed to be a really dark rune. The way I've heard of it described is like that all of nature has like this point where the energy is going into the center, and it's pulling in from a very deep place where it's like making a call. And once the energy gets there, regardless of what it does, what is the product or anything, the fact is that it leaves an imprint on that area or that place or that being. And that imprint, I think, has to do with like this unconscious fear of the future is coming, is coming, is coming. And then we're forming, we're becoming. And that ultimately has like an end point, is like psychologically we're in some way aware of death. So I think what you're saying, Lynn, to me it makes a lot of sense, because if we're just constantly creating time, what is it for? It's like avoiding that link, avoiding that awareness of the point of death, or the point of what could be. Maybe it's not death, maybe it could be transformation. Maybe transformation could happen every day if you were to give up some of that, stop pushing it away.
Maybe we're in a way avoiding the connection to the land, because the land, it it alone, I guess, and in the far future will be dead, but it's also the basis of all life. That is.
I see what you Wow. So it's almost like it's possible that when we run away from that unconscious link to death, we maybe it's a mistake to think that your thoughts of that are of yourself. It might be of something much greater. You might be cutting yourself from the fear of a death of something much greater, not even knowing that you're just like burdening yourself thinking that it's all about you. It might have never been about those fears, may be much like raw information of a much greater impending doom. That's very interesting.
But there's also like message of joy in that, as we are alive and we are here.
Right. That's the part that gets thrown out,
Yeah.
not even noticed.
And kind of by disassociating and like being away in fantasy and all this stuff, it's also kind of like connected to then, because a lot of these things kind of like with the age of Cancer and Gemini kind of also throws back to like instincts and kind of being like connecting to this wildness and being alive. And it kind of, I feel like in that way the fear of death is not just the fear of death, but it then becomes also a hindrance of us being fully alive. To fully like dance wildly and live and actually be alive.
This is a very big mind trip.
Yeah. I saw there's something written about Age of Taurus. It's like, agriculture starts to happen then, and there are still some links like Age of Taurus with like the Age of Cancer stuff that was there, but it started to slowly shift though away from that. By the age of like Aries, it really started to like shift away, and these, even Feronia as a nature goddess, they took it to Rome somehow. Or like somehow they were like, yeah, we're just gonna take this to Rome, and she's just gonna be we're gonna just do it there. But they lost this connection to nature, and slowly like we lost this connection over time, and with it kind of also the connection to instincts or wild self, but also kind of this deeper connection to life, kind of in that sense, and community. It's slowly fading away, being broken down, and I don't know, maybe like the age of Aquarius is this like coming together again of these elements of community in that sense, maybe like that we reintegrate all of this. Because I've heard like a lot of people talk about the two fishes of Pisces, and like that's all what it is. And I kind of feel like, no, that like we have to understand all of this stuff too. Otherwise, we don't understand the context of the age of Aries or Pisces and what comes after, if we don't understand what came before. I mean, Age of Leo, for instance, one thing that I know that I can throw in there is also an age of symbolism, the age of imagination, symbolism, and that we started to like really see that in the world and connect to that, to the spirits. That's when that really started, and eventually that became these like cults of fertility and these goddesses. And then later on, like the sky god became more important in the age of Gemini, and that started to form. And then like, you had then with like, I mentioned like Apollo, but also like Uranus and Mars, and also Janus. And they're also linked to the Koryos, the age of Gemini stuff. But that, like at that time, it started to shift and become like just pure war gods. And like a lot of the rites of passage kind of stuff started to like slowly fade. By the time of the Romans, like the Romans didn't know anymore what Uranus really was about. They didn't know what it was about. It was just like a ritual they did for the sake of ritual, but they didn't really know anymore like what it was. And like in the late like Roman era, they had completely forgotten about it, about what it was about. They didn't have it anymore. They lost it. And that's kind of like something that like slowly, like, yeah, like you said, like it's like time is breaking these things apart. And I kind of feel like at the same time, it's up to us kind of like to put it back together kind of and understand this like a historical flow and understand like what we have to go back towards kind of. It's like a journey back in time to the source of something much greater that we kind of then can reconnect to and can understand like this is where we came from, and like, hey, wait, we're alive, and like everything is just amazing, like this world is amazing and it's alive and it's changing, and we're part of all of this, and everything is just breathing, and I'm like I am a tree in that sense, and I'm a part of the trees, and the trees are a part of me, and everything is in one big like connection to everything else. It's kind of like this like kind of what the anima or thumos in that sense is about too. It's about this connection, this relationship between everything, and between us and ourselves and everything else. And like, and then kind of like in Age of Aries and beyond, like started to like, yeah, forget about this. And then we had the Vikings too, with like the wolf headner, the wolf skin it's called. And then I think, like about the werewolves and stuff like that. What is all of that? What is even furries with the wolf furries and all these different animals? What is that really? I've heard about a lot of these different people that they started dreaming about being a wolf and shapeshifting into a wolf. What are they dreaming about? Archaic remnants, how they are called. And what is it actually really? It's not an archaic remnant. It's not something that you should dismiss and it's like in the past. No, it's actually a message from the subconscious, from in that sense you can say from the spirit world, and it's an old message in an old language that we don't tend to understand. But what it's saying is, listen, it's time to grow up. But the thing is that what happens is this goes into fantasy, and then they become a wolf with a diaper, and it becomes weird.
Yeah.
But really what it's about
is their wires crossed.
Yeah, but really what it's about this wolf shamanism and this very ancient stuff. And there's more to it. It's like you have to, basically what it's saying, listen, you have to connect to instinct, to your wild self. You have to integrate that so you can break free from your parents and your mental parents, so to speak, so that you can become your own individual. You can pull your dick out of the stone, and you can become your own king, build your own kingdom. Because that's also one thing with the Age of Gemini. Not all of these young men came back. Some of them, most of them came back to the society. Others went somewhere else. They became kings, and they founded their own society, their own kingdoms. It's like, I think, Neirum, you said something about the Mormons once, about like how some stay away and some come back. That's exactly that. I think that's something that they preserved in that way, that they allowed that. That's the old like wolf shamanism kind of ritual in another form, but that's kind of what's missing. That like young men and women can do that they can go out there into the world. That's what it's about. Go out there and into the world and make something out of yourself. And like I might be your parent and something, your dad, your mom, or something like that, but you have to go out there into the world, and we have to like let you go and make something of yourself, so that you can learn something and you can bring something back. Because that's what they also did. They through their experiences they brought something back, something that's missing. And they brought life to something that would be otherwise dead. And that's what it's all about.
So you call these things archaic fragments?
Archaic remnants, it is called. Like Freud Freud and Carl Jung called them like that. That's basically the term for it that they use. But I kind of find that it's not a remnant. It's more like an archaic message. That's how I would put it. It's really what it is.
Okay, you call them... I want to write this stuff down because it's very similar to some of my theories about like consciousness. It's essentially... You said archaic messages, right? That's what you call them?
Yeah, that's basically what it is. It's a message from, like, on one channel Jung to Live By would say, like, it's coming from the genome or something, but it's like, it's something imprinted in ourselves from the evolution of consciousness from the past all the way up to now, and how it speaks to us kind of like when we're hitting these blockages is in this quote-unquote archaic way. But the thing is that things like around us change so much, but the thing is that we didn't. We didn't change that much. We're kind of still the same beings that we were. We think that we are not, and we're going to transcend and become like, I don't know, kind of stuff. But the thing is, the matter of the fact is we're still the same beings. We still have these old dreams, and we still have to go through these rites of passage, these different stages of life. That's really what it is. And then
so it's like this idea, I called it dragon shards or like fragments, and it was a reference to the myth of like the Dropnar and like Balder. And I think for me, this astrological wheel has to do with like the procession of the path of a metaphysical being being produced by this drop, and then its successive rites of passage.
Yeah.
And I think so, like the link between Aries age and like the age of Pisces is like where these previous mythic symbolisms or idols become sort of just vanity pieces, which in a sense is appropriate because Aries sort of represents the idea of like, well, if we're going to worship something or we're going to use something to meditate, it should be a depiction of our ancestor. So that's okay. But the fact is that like it's disconnected in terms of understanding how to use it. And then the next one is Pisces, where it's like we all become one, or we go back into Balder or like the dragon or whatever you want to,
Yeah.
the great being, right? And um but my idea of these shards was that you essentially like have to face that without that mind-blowing initiation moment. Your conception, the general human's conception of themselves is not like a real person. It's like it's like an arbitrary connection in between all of these different points of information, where some of them are these shards or fragments or messages, and some of them are trying to recall, to keep going through the passage to get more of the fragments. And then eventually there will be like a resonance where that person emerging personality is actually going to start regulating in between the fragments, and instead of it just being um routines or
Yeah.
fixations or comforts.
Mm-hmm.
So you mean like in a way to through time learn about these different aspects, so the different signs in the zodiac, and then realizing that they are actually still like part of one much bigger thing together.
Yeah, it's like yeah, because it's like they have to be called into your memory, and some of them already exist in the memory, sort of like how you're saying, like the furries. So the furries have like a fragment, but and then that fragment is isolated in their personality, and their personality is not like the real them, right? In order for the real personality to emerge, that fragment has to be, like you said, you have to go and get more fragments so that there begins to be a resonance in between the fragments. And then that's the real them. And then maybe they have more than one and they already have a resonance. So they have like a little bit more real themselvesness, and some people have gone on the journey for a long time and they have a lot, they have a lot of resonance. um I guess to me it's like a way to understand like what is a who really knows who they are, and it's like how
Yeah.
many pieces have you gotten and integrated.
Yeah, and there is something like very like a long time ago. I heard this someone who was looking into this as well. I forgot who they are, but it was an old YouTube channel. I don't really remember what it was, but they said something about like that kind of remembering these different like archaic remnant messages or shards or however we want to call them kind of is key in like going through these different rituals and things, and by remembering them, bringing them up to consciousness to kind of like level up and kind of like, yeah, indeed remember who we are, like more of who we are, and bring more of that potential that of who we are out into like conscious awareness, so we really like become more fully us, and not just in that sense like some just the cultural conditioned thing, because there's so much more locked in our being that we actually are. We don't have to transcend being human the transcending element in of itself lies within us. It's like these messages that are hidden inside of us, kind of, in that sense, that help us to transcend through these phases and learn more about who we are and how we are connected to the world, how we're not alien to the world and a stranger in this world, but that we are about something that transcends, kind of, but at the same time connected to everything. That we
Right.
really are like a child of the world.
Well, I need to end it here for me. I have work in 1 hour and or 55 minutes. So, but you know, it was an amazing talk, and I'm glad I was able to get to this point because I wanted to at least talk about the Gemini stuff.
Yeah,
Um, y- uh, keep it going. You know, I hope to come back for another one.
would be
Yeah, this is
awesome.
great.
All right, you guys, take it easy.
Yeah. See you, Lavan. Great talking to you, man. Take it easy, dude.
Yeah, see you guys. Bye bye.
Yep. See you, man.
See you.
Yeah, with regards to that kind of like about Age of Gemini and like an Age of Cancer and that stuff, it's like it's kind of what I wanted to say, and also about like the Age of Taurus and Age of Aries, kind of like how these things kind of link back. And it's like similarly, I kind of feel just about Age of Aries still. It's kind of like, well, you kind of also have these different men, like just say like an Uber boy who's looking at the Age of Aries and stuff, and different other channels and other people that are looking at it, and there's like, we need to be like a hero, and we need to and we need to like swing our sword around, and like, and all kinds of stuff
Right.
like that, but they're not understanding the ground their myth. And I think a lot of these elements are like preserved in like the Grail myth and like King Arthur. It's a lot of these elements are in there, like similarly with Merlin and all of this. It's like it's in there in its own way, and that's kind of like bringing back to like the king. It's kind of what I kind of feel like saying, really. And yeah, I mean, Age of Taurus. It's like, well, the Dionysian rites and stuff like that was really big in the Age of Taurus. It's like the bull is like a big symbol for Dionysus too. Its connection to that. But I mean, that kind of continued. But it's like, yeah, it's these three stages, kind of like this connection of between, of like breaking free from your parents, becoming an adult, and integrating into society, and then upkeeping this connection, this alignment with the self, with the environment, and with kind of the being that you are. It's kind of like what it's all about. I don't know if any of you have like still something to say.
I thought it was
No, go ahead.
very thanks. The when you were said about the king, that it's like the when the subconscious and the conscious mind work together, and then also connected to the environment. That makes a good king, a functional individual. Yeah,
Yeah.
just wanted to, I guess, recap that part because it was, I think, insightful.
No, I don't really have anything to add to everything. I thought this was a wonderful conversation, and I think we covered a lot of what we've talked about in private on this concept of kingdoms and kings and what to do after you've done your exploration. You've got to make a foundation out of it. You've got to have a place to congregate. You've got to have a place to make a family and project yourself into the future. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know a lot about this other stuff that you're talking about, like the age of Gemini and but I hope I was able to contribute. Yeah, I was learning a lot about those types of things. I'm not super familiar with that side of the equation, but
Yeah.
but it makes sense what you were saying. And it tracks with me and what I know on my side of the equation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think in that sense, like, yeah, we kind of like figured out like the wild hunt and like all these different elements kind of all coming together. And I don't know, like a long time ago, I was already feeling like, yeah, we're looking at Age of Pisces and Age of Aries, but like I feel like something is missing. Like we're not understanding this right because something felt off, to me at least, and
Right.
felt like that like, yeah, like Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Peugeot and all these other figures. It's like it's nice, but something is missing because something doesn't feel right. Because I had these things come up, and I was just like, I need to understand this. And like, yeah, and
Yeah.
I finally like I got to this combination of kind of everything after all these years. And yeah, and I think like what you said, like, yeah, building our kingdoms and these foundations and then projecting ourselves forward into the future. That's
Yes.
like, it's an important thing. I mean, one last thing about the Age of Aries. There used to be
Yeah.
very in the beginning of, or like more in the beginning of Age of Aries with the Romans, there used to be they had Quirinus and they had Mars. Quirinus was the gentle king, and more like a social aspect of it, and a more civil aspect where Mars was more like aggressive and outward and more like with the wolf shamanism Gemini stuff concerned. And there was this division that they had. Eventually, they forgot about Quirinus. Really, they were just pushed it aside and were like, no, we're just going to focus on Mars. And then eventually they focused on Jupiter, and then all of that other stuff like started to kind of slowly fall away, and they kind of forgot this stuff, and the balance was lost because they had this balance between it's like, yeah, going out into the world but also coming back into society part, and they lost that. And I kind of feel like that's like a slow like that's kind of the first nail in the coffin of the Roman Empire. It's kind of where it started, and all of the other stuff was kind of like different nails that happened after that they lost the connection to nature, to instinct, to their actual roots. And I kind of feel
They
like,
hung out in the city too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had too many orgies and they had too many walls up, and they forgot that they're people. They started to think that they're statues or something, I guess. I don't know what happened to them. But I do see a repeat of that. But I also do see a lot of people aware of this problem and actively fighting against it and trying to do something a little bit different. So not all hope is lost. Humans survived the fall of Rome. I think we'll survive the fall of Western civilization too.
I think so too.
And hopefully we come up with something a little more balanced. Maybe we can all live in tree houses. Maybe we'll make it a little longer hanging out in nature still. I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, maybe like round this episode up then. I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. I got a whole lot out of it.
Same. It's always awesome talking to all of you.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I'm glad we've kept this a regular thing. We need to continue to do it.
Yes, much appreciated.
Yeah, me too.
Ground your sword. Shut down your machine. Turn your difficulty into strength, your challenge into development, yourself removing the stone from the shoe of your dare. Unless you happen to be at a stage in your life where you are exploring the void. Hurt inevitably happens, wallowing, slowness, dodge. Love too. You get the note. Our vitality is the same, and I shan't judge you. And even if we didn't arrive in an instant, so we would not be discouraged, but would continue even if we stumble.